So guys, tune into the show. Don't miss it because it's going to be an amazing show. You are going to be touched. You're going to be amazed. You're going to be excited. It's Thursday, 11 o'clock on a Thursday. The Message Talk Show with Alex Gordon. Yes, don't miss it. So guys, tune into the show. Don't miss it because it's going to be an amazing show. You are going to be touched. You're going to be amazed. You're going to be excited. It's Thursday, 11 o'clock on a Thursday. The Message Talk Show with Alex Gordon. Yes, don't miss it.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Message Talk Show. Welcome to all of you, wherever you're watching from, wherever you're tuning in from. The States, USA, Australia, Jamaica, hey, London, Birmingham. Hey, wherever you are this morning, I welcome you to the Message Talk Show because here is another day. We're here for another day. And as I was saying to my friends this week, when you turn up for another day and you open your eyes and you can see, man, you need to give thanks. You need to give thanks for that day because you don't know yet you weren't not going to be here, do you? You haven't got no control over whether you arrive in another day or not. All you have is the now, this moment that I'm looking at you through the camera, this moment that I'm broadcasting to you on podcasts, broadcasting to you on Facebook, broadcasting to you on YouTube, broadcasting to you on LinkedIn. All we have is this moment. The moment that we're in, there's no guarantee for anything else. And so we have to share the moment. We have to make sure those moments are precious. We have to make sure we utilize them to 100% of our ability. Okay? So this is the Message Talk Show with Alex Gordon. And when I started the Message Talk Show is to help and to assist and to push people out. You come across people who are talented. You come across people who have great gifts. But the one thing they don't do is market and push themselves out. That's the one thing they failed to do. So when I created the Message Talk Show during lockdown, I thought, right, let's get out there. Let's talk to some people. And have I spoken to some people? I've spoken to some awesome people, some awesome persons who are so talented, so gifted. And man, I have got another guest in here today. This lady is gifted, talented, and passionate about what she wants to do and how she's impacting the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce for you today, coming all the way from across town, well, then Miss Joanna Oliver. Joe, how you doing?
Hey, Alex, I'm good, thank you.
Wow, as I said, Joe, all we have is this moment, isn't it?
Absolutely.
There's no guarantee of tomorrow. There's no guarantee of anything else. And in the last 16, 18 months, I know so many people who've passed away, just taken away from us without any warning whatsoever. Have you experienced the same thing, Joe?
Not kind of within, well,
people that you know of, connected around you.
Due to the dreaded COVID. But yes, I think there's a lot of loss and a lot of fear right now and a lot of anxiety and almost in the air. It's almost palpable, isn't it? And I think, you're talking about being in the now. I think that's one of the things that can rob us of being in the now, because particularly fear and anxiety, they're very future focused. They can rob us of the now, can't they?
Yeah, they rob us of the now, and they rob us. Even I was saying to someone the other day that what also happened during this time, with so many people passing, it's robbed us of the healing process. People grieve and it brings healing and it brings consolation to them and their families. And the time that we're living now has robbed people of that. And so our mental health is just in a very terrible state right now across the whole world.
Absolutely. I mean, certainly over, lockdown, one quite early on, and one kind of later on last year, I've had to tune into 2 remote funerals for people that would have had quite a massive showing out, really, if it would have been in usual times. So as you say, it's kind of we're missing some of the usual, I guess, rituals that go with the grieving process. We are missing those. Wow. And they are important.
So important. But guys, I'm here to tell you today that deepest condolences to you if you've lost someone. But at the same time, we're telling you here today that we're here to talk, we're here to speak, we're here to share, we're here to open up. And as you talk to your friends, talk to the people around you, talk and bring healing to the people around you. Let's just get talking. Let's just have conversations going on. Don't isolate ourselves in our homes. Don't isolate ourselves and just stay on our own and brood. We've got to keep talking and talk to each other. So today I've got Joanna Oliver, and she'll be talking today about how to develop ourselves. How do we grow? How do we push ourselves? How do we push ourselves even in this time? How do we still keep a focus on developing ourselves, making ourselves grow, become better people, become better persons, and just to make that big step for our lives? It's so important. And if we don't keep pushing ourselves, the worst thing that could ever happen is that you stay stagnant. And if you stay stagnant and you don't grow, what happens to stagnant water? Have you ever seen water that's stagnant? It's not moving. It's just sitting there. Have you ever seen that kind of water? What happens? Hey, tell me, what do you think happens? Okay, guys, so if you're joining me all around across the world, put a 1 in the chat and tell me where you're joining us from. Tell me where you're joining us from. I'm podcasting, I'm streaming, I'm live at the same time. And you know what? I'm so excited about the time we're living in now, because it is so important for us just to get ourselves out there. And we have so many tools allowing us to get ourselves out there talking. And I'm streaming at the moment, and I love streaming. I love the video conferencing and streaming. I love it. And I haven't got myself into Clubhouse just yet. I need to somehow make an attempt to jump on Clubhouse, but then you got to work, right? You can't just spend all day chatting, can you? Or if you can chat and make money at the same time, that is very good. Right, so Joe, now tell me, Joe, who are you, Joe? Who do you serve? And what got you here, Joe, to where you are today?
Good questions, Alex, to start us off. So who am I? As you say, I'm Joanna Oliver, and I live in Kent, mum of 3, and I work from home mainly, hence being able to do things like this. So I have 2 kittens running around this room in the background. I've done all this, made all this effort to keep the background noise to a minimum, and then I've got kittens tearing up paper. So apologies for that. But anyway, and I guess, I mean, you talked about me kind of being multi-skilled, multi-talented, whatever it was that you said. And I think that is really the essence of what I do. So I draw on a range of different skills and tools, experiences, I guess, qualifications and professional background to serve a whole host of different people. And I guess I've kind of gone against the rules of marketing in a way. So I do actually have a degree in advertising, media and marketing. That was my first degree back in the 90s. But I've kind of almost like gone against that by setting up Consult a Chameleon. And Consult a Chameleon is If you think about the chameleon, changing colours, mixing and blending and being responsive, that's really what I do. So, you know, somebody can come to me for support with, and it's happened recently, proofreading their manuscript and helping them to set up their online learning program. And that's kind of developed into mentoring and helping them with their online presence as well. So I'm very much, I mean, I think that there's a fine line, and we spoke about this before, Alex. It's that fine line between kind of being open to developing yourself and diversifying, and also staying in your lane. So, I mean, clearly you don't just kind of pick up everything. So who I serve is who I feel, and this sounds really, I'm not meaning it to sound cliche, but I do feel called to serve. So I'm very much like, does this feel right? So that could be, you know, a teenager, or it could be a man older than me, or a woman older than me, or it could be somebody in another country. I don't necessarily look at those things specifically. I'm more tuned into, do I think I can help this person? And more often than not, they find me anyway. So I get messages all the time through Facebook or Instagram, and people will say, I think you can help me. And then I say, okay, let's have a conversation. So my marketing, as much as I studied marketing, isn't really down that kind of traditional kind of strategic route. It's very much an evolving process. How did we get here? How did I get here? I got here really by making an attempt to be true to what you said about being in the now. It's not easy always, because we're human beings, right? So we, of course, we think about, oh, what happens next month, and, you know, being a mum of 3, or my children, and all of these different things. But as far as possible, staying in the now. And as I say, picking up things, work, activities, engaging in things that feel right. Not in a whimsical way, but in a very, I think, very grounded way. I am quite self-aware, and I would say that that's probably my biggest skill and tool for life.
Wow. Being self-aware. Hey, let me welcome you to the podcast. Welcome you to the stream this morning. We're speaking to Joanna Oliver, talking about how to develop yourself. And very quickly, let me just say hi to one of our participants outside, one of our viewers, one of our faithful viewers. Faithful viewers, that's always on the, yes, here she goes, yes. And this is Bola. Hi, Alex and Joe. Bola from London, UK. Hi, Joe. Hi, Bola. And, you know, we do things and we assume, let me put it this way. There was something you just said earlier, that people come to you. Yeah? People come to you. People hear about you. People hear from the grapevine. All right. So there's no big marketing campaign going on outside there. There's no big, but this word of mouth consulting that goes on in our communities, this word of mouth talking that goes on, people hear about you, and, you know, oh, do you know someone who can do this? Oh, speak to Joe. Do you know, speak to Joe? Oh, speak to Joe. Oh, speak to Joe. Before you know it, your phone's ringing. People are saying, Joe, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that, Joe? And that is amazing when it happens like that, you know. See, that you haven't got a big marketing campaign, but there was something that you said that really caught me the very first time I spoke to you. Yeah. And you mentioned it again about consulting a chameleon. Now, I just thought, what's this about? What is this thing about a chameleon? Tell us about that, Joe.
Yeah, Alex. I mean, again, I remember in the early days, I remember actually when I really decided to make the chameleon a business or a profession, bring it into the professional rounds. I dropped off I do bid writing, funding bid writing. And back then I'd done a tender, and it was before we had online portals to upload to. I probably had them, but we didn't use them. And I remember driving, or I think I'd driven or got the train, whatever, to London Bridge to drop off to a local authority this tender that had been put together and bound and all of this. I deliver it by hand. And I was sat by London Bridge. It was a lovely sunny day and I was absolutely shattered because I've been up finishing off this tender and making sure it's perfect. And I was sat there in the sun, people watching, and I got my iPad out. This was in 2013. And I got my iPad out and I used a mind map tool on there and put consult a chameleon in the middle.
Wow.
Because and then I did all, and I've still got this mind map and it's wholly complex with all these different spin-offs. But I kind of had this idea, this vision of transferable skills and okay, so if I can write a tender, I can write a bid. If I can write a bid, I can write, I can write a I don't know, because a bid is partially a pitch as well. If I can write a bid, I can write a pitch, I can write a press release. And I realized that the connect between all these different things, but also one of my things around being a writer is the fact that I have a therapeutic background as well. So I have 2 master's degrees. One's in therapeutic childcare. Wow. And I've worked in therapeutic communities. I worked a lot with young people who had experienced lots of trauma. And so what I realized when I was doing that work was that I had a really good ear for what was being said, but also what was not being said. And because you're dealing with things in the moment, you're not sitting there with pen and paper writing it all down, but you do need to kind of take on that person and let them know that you're feeling them and you're hearing them. So I guess I developed some real skills in remembering, in making connections, in helping them to make connections and saying, okay, so earlier on you said this to me. Wow. I'm just wondering how you feel about that and how does that relate to this? So those were kind of skills that I developed because I needed to. And I felt then and feel now that I brought those skills into my written world as well. So when I'm talking with somebody and they're saying something, I'm kind of hearing what they're not saying as well. Even if it's over the phone, I don't need to see them. Wow. The chameleon concept, though, and I guess there's another message here, which is that nothing is ever wasted. I studied.
Write that down, guys. Nothing is ever wasted.
It's never wasted.
That one already.
Because we can beat ourselves up, Alex, can't we? About not succeeding, this whole notion of success and not doing the things that we're supposed to do, or not doing them at the age or the time. And I'd set this target that I was going to get my doctorate by a certain age. And that age went by, so I set a new landmark and set a new one. I have what I call my menopause baby. She's 7, so I wasn't expecting to have number 3 in that way. And she's here, she's beautiful, and she's live, really full of life. And but at the time, I was studying for my doctoral. It was a doctorate, an educational doctorate. Wow. And I devised this concept of chameleonism and being chameleonic as part of my, my exploration of my own identity.
Where was that? This manifested when you were doing your on the doctoral.
I was doing my doctorate.
But yeah. Where was it sown? Where did it come from? Where can you first had any insight at all about this gift that you had?
Okay. So where it actually came from was reflecting on my own identity. And one of the things as I was growing up that I remember really distinctly was I was always asked how I saw myself. And that comes from being of mixed race parentage. So people would always say, how do you see yourself? And what I also realized from that situation, even as a young child, is that people would ask that question, but it would be a really loaded question. So I developed quite a sophistication around the way I responded to that over time, and realized that what happened next would be determined by what I said in response to that question. So as I was doing my doctoral study and reflecting on my own history, I started to realize that I developed skills in being chameleonic. And I literally wrote it down oh, it's like chameleonic, because I thought it's almost like a chameleon. And when I spoke to the professor that was supervising me about that, he was like, oh, yes, I love that, you know. And I was like, okay, let's run with that then. So I started writing a lot about embracing your chameleon, developing your chameleon, and being chameleonic. And there were other terms that we used, chameleonism as well. Ooh. So it all came from that. There was no backdrop. I mean, as I looked into it, and obviously it was doctoral study, so I did have to kind of research some underpinning around that, but I'd never heard of it myself until I spoke of it. There are things written in kind of, certainly in the psychological field, around well, they call it, they take it into the world of mimicry.
Yeah,
but it's got quite a negative undertone, almost like having a personality disorder. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to ditch that notion, because I actually think it's been really valuable for me. And what I realized was that those skills that I developed as a child, and some of them were survival skills, actually, a bit like the chameleon, being able to camouflage, I guess, being able to get along with, I guess. Some survival of those instincts. Skills. Say?
I think there's survival instincts.
Survival instinct, that's right. Being adaptable, being flexible, being responsive. I realised that I was using those skills in my professional life. Now, you've heard me say that my first degree is in advertising, media and marketing. You've heard me say that I have one master's in therapeutic childcare. I have another master's in education.
Wow.
And the message about nothing being wasted is that because of being pregnant with my third child, I ditched my studies, my doctoral studies. I was at the writing up stage. I'd done all the research, but I decided not to continue. And so although I didn't continue with that and didn't get the kind of the Dr. Oliver, it wasn't wasted, because what I've done with the chameleon element is fantastic. You know, it's brilliant, and a lot of people get it as well. There were some people early on that said, no, you know, don't do that, Joe, you're going to confuse people. They're going to say, well, what is it you do? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to take that risk and actually buck against the trend of having a niche and having a you know, a very specific target market.
I find that amazing that people would turn around to you and say, don't go that route, because if you step into something called chameleonism now and helping people to explore the different facets of themselves, because we all have a kind of one face for something, one face for another, the world of work, how we present ourselves, the world at home, the world in our community. We present ourselves in different ways all the time. And that's a form of chameleonism, but we don't recognize it. But for you to coin a term and then put it out there, you know, and especially for I think for working women who are fulfilling so many different things, and if they happen to be single parents as well, it helps them to understand themselves and understand how they can operate. So chameleonistic behavior. Oh my! I love that. I love that word. From the day you told me that word, man, I've been saying it. Chameleonistic behavior. You should have a chameleonistic institute out there, just coaching and helping young people to understand themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, and making it okay. And I think that's a big part of this, is that, you know, young people and all of us really, we're all seeking and searching, aren't we? So there's that sense of, am I doing it right? Am I okay? Is what I'm doing okay? You know, how do people see me? How, you know, and all of those things. Even people that are quite, I think, quite finished and grounded have those times of questioning. And I think that, the kind of chameleonism, if you like, the chameleonic space allows you to explore that without it being a deficit. Being, you know, it's not deficit to be still exploring yourself. I mean, my belief is the day I stop exploring myself is the end of my days, you know.
The day you stop is the end of your day. So you need a chameleonic space to help
Yeah.
yourself. Now,
Yeah.
if you were talking to a group of young people now about developing themselves now in the 21st century, what would be your conversation that you'd be having with them now about how to go about developing themselves? Bearing in mind that you've almost got 3 degrees. I mean, so, you know, you have a lot of information in your head. You know a lot.
Yeah, but you know what, Alex, it's really interesting, because I would say the greatest source of insight for me is my experience in life and being around people and having an open mind. I always say that I feel like I've been in many rooms, but I don't always stay in them. I also have looked through many windows, but not actually stepped into the room. So people can be talking about something with me that I haven't directly experienced. But, you know, empathy is a great thing, right? It's a great energy. If you think about, I'm a great fan of Carl Rogers' person-centered approach with the core conditions, one of them being empathy. So there's unconditional positive regard, empathy, and congruence. And if you think about that, I mean, you know, when I was first taught that, or first learnt it, let's say, it was almost like, these are the ingredients. And I was like, but how do you do it? How do you do it? And what I realized is that you don't do it. You are it. You experience it. You convey it. It's energy, right? Because I can't pretend to have empathy.
But then how, if when you've had a great life, when you've had a varied life experience, then you've got stuff to draw on. But when you haven't got that kind of life experience, and say you don't have as varied an experience as anyone else, how do you then develop that kind of empathy? How do you do that?
Because empathy is, you know, you don't have to have experienced the thing to empathize with the thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, just imagine something being on a scale, right? Loss would be one of them.
Yes.
Some people have experienced significant loss over the course of their life. And you could say, you know, are they the expert of loss? I don't know. I've got a bit of a theory around, just because we've experienced something doesn't mean to say that we can help other people with it. And I think that's a mistake that I see, particularly in the entrepreneurial space. Person A's been through these things. Hey, you could be a coach. No, it doesn't mean that. It means you've been through certain things, right? Because you have to have certain skill set. You have to be ready to dig into yourself in a particular way in order to be able to transmute that experience into something that's helpful for someone else. Equally, I know what it is to experience loss, even if my loss relatively is at the other end of the scale, is small.
Yeah.
The bit that I understand is how it feels to lose something that's important to you. Yeah. And that's the bit that I would tune into, even if I've not been through that specific experience. And I would say anyway, it's almost like a falsehood, isn't it? Because we on paper could look the same, Alex, apart from our gender, right? Potentially. We could have been through wow, I went through that at 15. Oh my gosh, at 21, so did I. But we would have experienced it completely differently.
Yes, yes.
So
yes.
even if I've been through the same experience, I don't really know. So empathy is almost like an energy, an opportunity to express to somebody that it's that space again, that you are able to provide a space of understanding, of hearing, of being open. That's what it is. It's not saying, I know exactly what you've been through, because I've been there as well. You know, it's not saying that.
Wow. So that brings me to that point that you made earlier, that you've been in many spaces, you've been in many rooms, but you've not stayed there.
Right.
Wow. So you've got into a room, done what you had to do in that room, but you didn't stay there. Sometimes if you stay there, it could be to your detriment if you stayed there.
Yeah. Some rooms I have stayed in, Alex, I have to say. But I guess what I feel is that there's not much. I guess what that's done for me is there's not much that people can say to me that's going to shock me. So, you know, and again, in that moment of, you know, unconditional positive regard, for instance, if someone's speaking to me about something that they may have done, it may be something that they've done, something, you know, bad that they've done, I'm not going to be there, go, oh, you know, and my facial expression isn't going to be one of, oh, yeah. Well, actually, it could be shock or it could be surprise because I didn't expect it. But the other person could receive that as disagree, you know, me disagreeing or distaste. It may not have been meant that way, but it's really difficult to take that back, right? Because if somebody already feels like they may be judged, they're going to be looking for the judgment.
Yes.
Right, because they're predisposed to it. So it's really important for me that being, you know, looking in lots of windows or being in lots of rooms is important fuel to be able to be open so that people can talk about things. And I'm not going to be thinking, oh wow, you know, wouldn't have expected that. I think my mantra is we're all one step away from each other. So anything anyone else could have done, given the right circumstance, so could I.
Wow. Because for young people today, that concept that you mentioned, being in many spaces, being in many rooms, not staying there, or being through many windows, young people have that experience today where they're involved. They can be exposed to so many different things.
Yeah.
And it's to their detriment. It can be to their detriment if they hang out there, or if they take an action which is which will damage the rest of their lives, or criminalize them, or behavior that will affect them for the rest of their lives. So how would you explain to a young person, you know, living their life now, to say, okay, you'll be exposed to many things, you're going to many different rooms, but you mustn't always do what the crowd's doing. You mustn't always just lock in and do. You can see, but you can pull yourself away. How do you get a young person to do that?
Well, I think, again, I said earlier on that self-awareness has been my greatest skill and tool. And I think it comes back to that. Greatest tool is self for all of us, you know, the helpers and the helpees, if you like, in any given moment. Greatest tool is self, always. And, you know, if somebody has a real sense of who they are, what their value system is,
but that
is their reality checker.
That happens when you tend to when you're probably going to 20s or so, or getting older as an adult. A great awareness of yourself when you're a young person doesn't necessarily happen that quickly. Am I right?
I guess it depends on experiences, doesn't it? Because I've met some young people that I would think, wow, they're wise beyond their years, you know, okay. And they're able to articulate that, you know, quite fantastically. And often I think people are given the opportunity to. I think sometimes people, again, it's that space, isn't it? You sit down and have a conversation with someone, and this is the other thing about listening. You listen to somebody in the way that they are speaking, not in the way that you expect them to speak. And they have untold pearls of wisdom. So, you know, if I think about when I used to work in therapeutic spaces, therapeutic communities, residential children's homes, you know, we'd be like, oh, talk to us, you know, we want to help. And then they'd start throwing things around the room and smashing things up. And we go, stop. Well, actually, they're talking to us, right? Wow. Are we listening? And I used to write a lot about this, funnily enough, before I even saw myself as a writer, looking underneath the upturned chair. Because we choose what we see, looking underneath the upturned chair. So a young person's trashed the room. Our space might be, oh my gosh, I'm scared, the fear, they are aggressive, they're angry. Is that really the case? If we look underneath the upturned chair, usually there's another story, another narrative, another motivation to that. Are we open to exploring with them and offering them the space to share in other ways? But first we need to hear them where they're at, you know, because this isn't about imposing our ways on people. We all come from different spaces. And if that young person, and I'm not saying that we say this is acceptable, but what we do need to do is accept that is where that person's coming from. So if that is the way that they have learned to communicate, that they have learned that when I need something, this is the way that I'm heard, that is the way they're going to express it. And, you know, we can't expect that just because we've decided to step into the room, they're suddenly going to communicate with us in a way that we see as acceptable, right?
Ooh.
That's how I view that. And I
That
developed a program, Alex, called Grow Free from Shackles.
growth.
Grow Free from Shackles. So my first acronym that came up was Grow Your Colours. That was the first one, obviously, because of the chameleon. But then I realised there was a deeper journey in this, which is growing free from shackles. And the shackles are whatever they are for you. So it's still chameleonic, right? It's still individual, it's still person-centered. But the shackles are, they could be anything. It could be messages you've received as a child. It could be trauma that you've experienced. It could be, sometimes religion can be a shackle because we've received certain messages about what we should and shouldn't do. And so the shackles acronym is silence, hearing, acceptance. So this is the acceptance. I've just spoken about acceptance, right? Acceptance of self, acceptance of others. Even if you don't agree, acceptance. Okay. Catching yourself in the act. So being in the now about what's going on and recognizing when you are engaging in patterns that aren't helpful to you, because we no longer need to have the experience. We perpetuate it afterwards, don't we? By continuing to live that way. Knowledge and being open to knowledge from lots of different spaces. So you spoke about my 3 degrees. I want to start singing, but I'm not going to. You know, you spoke about that, but actually what that's done is allowed me to frame things in lots of different ways, which is really useful.
Wow.
Right? Knowledge from different ways, love, self-love, most importantly, embracing all. So you know that term, take it all joy?
Yeah.
And nothing is ever wasted, right? Embracing all nothing is ever wasted would go under that umbrella if we were going to put it in a category.
Before you get to the S, let me
last
just
S is my favorite.
Before you get to S, let me just go on to my viewers and say, guys, welcome to our podcast, The Message Talk Show. Today I'm with Joanna Oliver, talking about how to develop yourself, talking about you. And today she's telling us that you need to be self-aware. You need to have an open mind. You need to listen to people where they are. Don't use your own interpretation and your own way of understanding things to impose that on people for them to talk to you at your level. You need to go where they are and where they're at. And that term that she used about looking under the upturned chair, whoo, that's big. Looking under the upturned chair, man. Hey, we're used to chairs being in a set way, set pattern, and if the chair's not the way that we think it should be, then hey, all hell breaks loose.
Right.
And sometimes some people have had such trauma in their own lives that everything they do is in an upturned kind of way.
Right.
It's not traditional. It's not what you and I will call our normal. But then, hey, there is no normal anymore. There is no normal. Forget normal. We are now resetting the way we do work and do behavior right now in our world. So, Joanna, tell us what the S is.
Yeah, it's my favorite S, and thank you, Alex, because I love the way that you are interpreting what I'm saying. I love this. It's great, and it gives me more food for thought as well. The final S, Alex, is shoulds go in the bin, and it's my favorite because too many of us live by shoulds instead of by, you know, what we actually want inside and how we want our life to be, you know. So I think all of those together, and it is a program. I guess I've said it's a program, but it's more of a framework. But I don't dictate. It's a framework because what people bring, because I've run it as a group session, but I also do it individually as well with people. Whatever people bring is what goes into each section, you know. And I just kind of work with whatever people bring to whatever it is that they need to say or work on or develop. because it needs to be person-centered. I'm definitely not a fan of follow this script and at the end of it you're going to become this. I'm definitely not that.
Rigid. Well,
Rigid.
You have through your education probably realized and found ways to convey information. So the way you've had to receive information, you've realized that that's not necessarily the way that you should be conveying information to the rest of the world.
No.
And so you are able now to develop different frameworks to help other people out there to bring them closer to what you know and understand. That's tremendous. That's amazing. Now, here's a question that's coming through from. The question is, how would you advise young women how to develop themselves today? Is there a clear path? Is there a clear path for women to develop themselves now? What would you say?
I guess, you know, that's definitely and you know, it's interesting because you're talking about young women, and this keeps coming up a lot because I guess I tend to, particularly with the Grow Free from Shackles, it tends to be mainly women, and it tends to be not older women necessarily, but definitely not young women, as in what I would see as, you know, young women in their teens and even pre-teens, I guess. So girls, young women, and early, you know, into their 20s. It tends to be kind of women in their definitely late 30s and 40s and sometimes 50s. But I have thought about this, like, how do we, this is grow free from shackles. What about something that says growing free from shackles? So this notion of, I guess, and I am reflecting in a moment, so excuse me if I'm a bit curly in the way that I say this, but I guess I think
I'm not judging you.
Don't judge, no judging. I guess there's two things going on in my head. One is that ideally we would avoid, wouldn't we, the pitfalls. You know, so therefore advising young women would be all about helping them not to step into spaces that are, you know, damaging, that cause the things that they then later need to grow free from in an ideal world. And yes, I think that there are ways to do that using the same message that I've just given about the Shackles acronym.
Right.
Because, you know, if you think at any point in time, we have a before.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we're talking about young women, you know, even if we're talking about a 16-year-old, they've had a before, you know, and so there will be that message around being in silence, and particularly now, because young women, you know, we're in a very busy time, right? And you know, it's not often that you won't see a young person with a phone in their hand or something. You know,
walking across the road, glued into their phones.
Right. So it's like there's always an entertainment. So even with the silence thing, it's like, okay, how can you integrate silence into your life so you can hear yourself? Because when you're on that gadget, you can't hear yourself, you know. And I am on social media a lot, and I have to make time for silence and space and me without all of that noise. Right. So, I think the first thing is, yes, to use the same acronym with young people. The other thing that I think is, and it's almost a contradiction, and I don't mean it to be, it's just what I think, is that I've said that, yes, I have the education, but actually the greatest teacher has been experience. I do think that it's not about not allowing or not exposing young people to risks and life, right? Because you actually develop the skills, or you've developed those muscles, if you like. And I know resilience is used a lot, but you do develop resiliences through your experiences. So my guess is that in an ideal world, you know, a young person may be at the cusp of making a decision, or may have dipped their toe into a situation, and that they have opportunities, people usually around them, to be able to provide that space for them to be able to then explore in a really informed, open, again, non-judgmental way, what the implications are for stepping into that world further. Wow. And I say that in an abstract way because clearly there are, you know, oh, if you do this, then this and this. But then there's also kind of a very individualized way of looking at that, because again, each person will experience things differently. So I might be able to step into a whole room and step right out of there unscathed. Somebody else may step into a room and they're not stepping out the same at all because of who they are. So there's something about that, again, being really person-centered and kind of encouraging people. And again, that's why self-awareness is so key, because if that person's aware of what their triggers are, the things that bother them, how they process things, and you can do that. You can do that through hearing what people are saying and feeding it back to them and saying, okay, this is interesting. I said this earlier on. You've said this and I'm hearing that, and I'm wondering how that connects with that. That might be the first time that they've ever thought that there's a connection between this and that.
Wow.
Right. Wow. So and they may not want to accept it as well. That's the other thing. They may say no, because it's too much. It's like, I'm not ready to go there. But that's okay, because you can't unknow what you know. Is another saying.
You're not forcing on them, are you?
No, not at all. It's like, it's okay. But you do know that you've said it, they've heard it. And at some point in their lives, hopefully before too much damage, they will revisit that and go, oh my gosh, I remember Joe said this. You know, right. I've got people, I can remember things that were said to me years ago, and I go, oh my gosh, you know, the penny's just finally dropped what they meant.
Well, I mean, my next question to you that's coming up was, the question is, has race ever been an issue or a challenge for you?
Yeah, I would say so. But in the spirit of the way that I've been speaking so far, I think it's also been a gift, right? Because I would never have developed the notion around chameleonism or flexibility around, or an awareness of the different ways that people perceive you based upon something so fundamental as the color of your skin. And I mean, you know, there's so many things I could say about this, Alex, right? I grew up in an environment where I didn't know my dad. My dad is Jamaican. My dad's black. I grew up in a white environment, and in an area that was majority white. That clearly would influence my identity, the way that I perceive myself. It also gave me major insight into people. And then when I went to university first time and then moved to London, when I first moved to London, I moved to Tottenham, and then I moved to Southeast London. I was exposed to different worlds. And what I realized about that, which was really, I wasn't expecting it, because I guess I thought that I'd go from one world into another and I'd be embraced. Oh, welcome, you've come home. And it wasn't like that, right? I then faced more layers of complexity around race, and in particular, I guess, about being of mixed race parentage. And I guess then I'll add another layer to that around kind of shade and colour, and even some of the language. So language that I hadn't grown up with, like I'd never heard before I went to, I think probably uni, and then definitely when I moved to London, I'd never heard terms like good hair or fair skin. I did not grow up with that narrative whatsoever. I mean, I was followed around school called the hair bear bunch, things thrown in my hair. You know, I didn't have a concept of shade. So that was quite a surprise to me, I guess, that the way that people impose certain attitudes that they thought, that I thought certain things about myself because of how I look, or looked when I was younger, more so I would say, but you know, because I am a reflective person, and I think I see everything as a learning opportunity, I've not really taken that in and on as a negative thing. I've just seen it as insight, as a way of understanding. And you know, there's reasons why people have that thought process. There's reasons why that language developed. There's things that that we've had to inherit without even really realizing where it came from in the first place sometimes. And I think when we start to dig into it, we understand where it comes from.
Wow.
And I just want to say something about that in relation to trauma, because I've spoken about trauma. I do have a real mindset around trauma, and particularly today when we're talking about working with young people in a trauma-informed way. And I write a lot around this because a lot of the bids that I write are for organisations working with young people. That's my mainstay of work, and you know, it's a world I understand. But one of the things that I do think is that we're only scratching the surface. So we talk about trauma-informed practice, so somebody will go on a half-day workshop and suddenly they can deliver this. I think if we're really going to go there, we've got to go back generationally with this. It's not enough to say, I work in a trauma-informed way and just look at an individual in front of us. We need to look at everything that comes with that. So in the same way that, you know, I found that people were imposing certain assumptions about me, and I've been able to understand, well, actually, I get where that's coming from. Again, go back to acceptance. I accept that. I don't necessarily agree with it because it's not true for me, but I agree with it I guess I accept it as a social condition, right? Because it's real. It's real for people. So I think that for me, the only way to really truly work in a trauma-informed way, particularly when we're talking about the Black community, people that have experienced the levels of oppression and displacement, forcible displacement, that people in particular African descent have, is to go there in terms of trauma-informed practice, because we've inherited legacies.
Wow. I mean, loads of research, and we need to dig up the research
Massive.
from the past.
I'm doing some right now. Yeah, I'm doing some right now, but it's massive.
You're talking the language of Dr. Martin Glynn, a gentleman I had on the show a couple of months ago, and he's talking. He talks about history a lot. He said, we'll never understand ourselves here today and where we're going until we go back in history and look at history and how history has treated us and understand where it came from. And you're virtually saying the same thing.
Yeah, I need to speak to Dr. Martin Glynn, because he's in criminology, and actually the element that I'm researching now, I'm going again with the doctorate, which is a totally different field, and I'm looking at actually the criminal justice system, Black young men in particular, young adults, and autism.
That's his
and
genre.
Autism. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Joe, man, I could talk to you all day. This is just pouring out, and look at the time. It's running away. But let me ask you this question. What's your hopes for the future?
My future or the future?
Whichever future you see.
Wow. Maybe they are connected anyway, Alex, right? I think that my hopes for the future are that we all can work together better and create, I could keep saying spaces, but create spaces of comfort and acceptance and I guess love, in a way, if we want to go there, because I think that there needs to be a bit more of that energy. And the reason I talk about working together is I'm a great champion of collaborative working, and I understand some of the ways that we don't work collaboratively, and some of the reasons why that is. I can almost visibly see people's egos step out of them in the conversation, because what does this mean? But I already know this, and do I need them? And who's the leader? And all the kind of pushing and shoving for that, the roles. Right. So say,
who's the boss? Yeah.
Who's the boss? Who's the leader? And who, who's making the rules here? And do I have to give up so much of myself? And I guess in the spirit of chameleonism, there's an element of 1 minute I might be in the position of leader because I have that skill set in that moment, and at another time I'm backstage doing something because my skill set is best used there. And having the self-awareness and being led and in such a way, and having the confidence in such a way to be able to step into those roles comfortably and just not feel any way about it, really. It doesn't, you know, but I guess that is about not being so concerned about what other people think, right? So in the future, I would like to see us all, because I think, and again, we've talked a lot about young people, so that's now at the front of my mind. But, you know, in relation to our young people, they need to see that. They need to see us working together. And I think I hear a lot about people saying, oh, this doesn't exist, or I want to set up this. And I think this does exist, and there are people doing this. Are we willing to join forces to make that better and bigger and bolder and reach more? Or do we need to have our own thing because of ego?
Well, I think that's one of the most difficult things that we suffer from, in it, as what you just said there, because I have to go and set up my own thing because that makes me the boss. I'm in charge.
Right.
And rather than seeking, how can we collaborate? How can we work together? How can we find a point whereby we can both deliver at the same time we're delivering? We get to a point where we're contributing in such a way that we'd never have got to that point if we worked on our own. Right.
Yeah.
But those are the challenges that we face, because we all want to be our own boss.
I think people have been hurt as well, Alex. You know, again, this isn't always about taking this at face value, because I've spoken about the ego and I've kind of almost caricatured that a little bit. But underneath that upturned chair is sometimes people's experiences of being let down or used, or, you know, I've heard this a lot, and I've experienced it, people stealing people's ideas. So there are reasons why people don't always want to join forces, but I do think that we need to create a new narrative in order to make the change that will be really powerful. Yeah.
So if you was giving advice to your 16-year-old self, all the knowledge you've now, experiences you've had, you're looking back and you're giving advice to your 16-year-old self, what would you say?
Oh, I tell her that I tell her that to be herself, not to be afraid to be herself and be who she is, and to put herself first, that what she thinks of herself is more important than what other people think, and to just do the things that bring her joy, because those are the things that she's supposed to be doing. And I definitely expose her. And I just want to say, the Grow Free from Shackles, the Shackles acronym, I actually wrote a poem when I was about 12 called Shackles of Silence. So I kind of had this inkling about shackles many, many, many years ago. And I think that I would kind of advise my 16-year-old self to, you know, put the shoulds in the bin, to not get too caught up in the noise out there, and to engage much more in myself, in herself, and who she is and what she needs.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Amazing stuff. Amazing. I know we've been followed by Bola, and Bola has said, Bola's been answering some of the questions for us, and Bola has says that you should follow our instincts. She also said that race has been a challenge. She says use our knowledge to help others navigate positively through life. And then she talks about, says, one I missed out on teaching young people how to create boundaries, because that's important. Bola was just she was working along with us while we were speaking and just dropping her comments, and I just went through some of the comments there.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, no, absolutely. Boundaries. But, you know, I guess it's part of the process, because a boundary would be a byproduct, from my point of view,
right,
of self-love. So
okay.
the L in the acronym. So you're absolutely right. There would be lots of, imagine my mind map again now. There would be lots of spin-offs from all of these.
Wow. Now, we come to a close. We're closing, guys. We're coming to the end of the show. We should have closed ages ago, but I can't close without asking you about one of the projects that you worked on very recently. I'm just trying to bring it up. It was called the it's a big word for me, yeah. The anthology.
Yes, the anthology, Pioneering Women Speak. So that was an anthology of 9 women, transformative leadership on the rise. And I'm one of the contributors. I contributed a chapter called Grow Your Colours. There we are. There we all are. Convened by Winsome Duncan, who's the top right on my screen there, the red top, and she's the publisher, Peachy's Publications, and we all worked together collaboratively, and we really did, right the way through to deciding what the cover was, what the writing would look like. And what's interesting is we all kind of scurried away and wrote our chapters, and there's definitely, now I'm the proofreader for this book as well, there's definitely a thread that runs throughout all of the chapters, even though we didn't kind of liaise on our what we wanted to write about in that way. So yeah, it's a brilliant book. I do say so myself. So it will be on Amazon, and you'll be able to get a copy from there.
Wow. Amazing. So it looks like a massive project to pull all these people together to make this happen.
It's great. There will be a number 2 as well. If there are any budding authors, there will be a second anthology coming through. And knowing Winsome Duncan, she will just keep doing this whilst people are wanting to do it, because she's entrepreneur epitomized. She will always kind of respond.
So have you written a book yourself?
No, I haven't as yet. I'm one of these. I've got lots of books written in my head, Alex, right? I've written a few chapters, and I've written academic stuff before for journals and stuff, but I've never written a whole book of my own. But it's on its way. That's something that I'm making space for right now.
It's on its way. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had the opportunity today of having Joanna Oliver with us today for the past hour, talking about how to develop yourselves. And she's been talking about chameleonism, space, chameleonistic behavior. Hey man, this concept, man, I'm looking for this concept to be out there soon, Camelia. You should be out there teaching this in corporate settings. You should be out in conferences teaching chameleonism. So in the next 18 to 12 months, 24 months, I'm watching to see what you do with this stuff, because this is going to help people navigate their lives and their journey right now, because people aren't sure what to do now. People aren't sure. The path is no longer as normally as it was before. So now I have to make a decision. The decision is one of the comments that was made was that there weren't enough workers. People had resigned from their jobs, and there wasn't enough workers in some of the industries. Yeah. 1, people gone back to Europe. 2, people didn't want to go back to some of those jobs. They didn't want to go and do those jobs anymore. They wanted something different for their life. They were assessing where they are and want something different for their lives right now. Man, so you're ready for this. Chameleonism is ready. It's ready.
I like it, Alex. And so I will do a little shout out if anybody thought that is thinking that it might be a useful thing to bring into a space, your space, or a space that I'd be open to that. I've never, corporate world isn't a world that I'm in. I occupy very much at all. But yeah, I see where you're going with that, and thank you for planting that seed.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So you can get hold of Joanna, and I've got a link there showing Instagram. Yes, Consult a Chameleon. Yes, can get hold of you, can follow you, can get insights into you, what you're doing, what you're up to, and how you're helping to change the world, how you're collaborating to change the world as it is. Passionate about changing. So, Joe, thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for giving so much. You poured you're a thinker. I can see the thought process just coming through. And what would be your last word now? What would be your last word to just give to the public as we go?
My last words would be that I'm aware that I've said a lot, and so if and this is without any agenda. If anybody wanted to reach out to kind of explore anything further, or to say, could you clarify that? I'm very happy for people to do that. I think that's it really, because I think that again we're all on our own journeys, and again it's about saying I will step forward and do what's right for me. And if what's right for you is that you wanted to kind of say, well, actually, Jo, what did you mean by that? I didn't quite get what that meant. You said something. That's absolutely fine. And I'm here. You can get me on a Messenger. That's absolutely fine.
And Instagram, consult a chameleon.
Instagram, hey. LinkedIn.
Yeah. LinkedIn. Joanna
No
Oliver.
TikTok or none of that stuff. No Snapchat.
Hey, we're just having some thanks. Bola has come and said thank you for your insight today.
Thank you.
You know, she's been touched by your insight. And then Marcia Cook says, fantastic insight. Hey,
thank you.
You Jo, you can't keep this to yourself. You have to get out there with this information that you are holding, Jo.
Yeah.
You got to understand it. Yeah, it's not just for you, it's for the wide world out there. And other women out there that could benefit from what you're saying, from the contributions that you're making. Jo, thank you so much for being on the show. Brilliant. I thank you so much for being on the show, guys. And if you tuned in today from wherever you are, you were listening to the Message Talk Show today with Joanna Oliver. And, you know, watch this space. She's going to be back on this show. There's no way she's not coming back, all right? There is no, wherever we got to find
I'd love to.
Wherever we got to find her, we're going to bring her back in. And, you know, the days when we start having conferences again, hey, she'll be one of the speakers. She'll be one of the speakers out there, conveying her wisdom, conveying her knowledge, because she's so much to give. Guys, I thank you for tuning in today. I thank you for being who you are and for supporting me on Message Talk Show. And guys, as we close, one thing you've got to do is find the space for yourself. That's what Joanna says.
Miss the show. You got to be on this show.